Tonight's reading is in the memory of the wonderful Douglas Parks, who was my father's best friend, one of his best friends, a year older than him, and my father would have been 95 this year. So Douglas sadly spent his last 48 hours in hospital, having been at home gardening until 48 hours before he died last week. So he was my mentor and chivvier for making sure that I got this book into print. And this is his mentor, my grandfather's autobiography, Sir Harold Harding, civil engineer, tunneler extraordinaire. And this was the first book that I published. The original idea had been that it would be traditionally published by a fancy pants publisher, but he had a very peculiar idea that my grandfather was particularly good at writing short, pithy sentences, and this publisher wanted to string them all together. And it was like turning, let's say, Ted Hughes into Charles Dickens. Both talented, just not the same people by any stretch of the imagination. So that had taken a year to get to the stage where we amicably parted ways. And then, because last night's book, The Likings of Jersey, I designed and edited, but it was actually published by the Société Jersiaise. So almost everything had been done for that by me. And so by the ready, there was a bit of delay in actually getting it printed. And so it didn't make sense to keep touting around for publishers to take years and years and years, particularly as by this stage it was 2015 and he died in 1986. He wrote it because publishers craved it, but then they didn't like the fact that he didn't put enough of the right sort of sex for them in it. It was there's some naughty observations and there's some extraordinary characters, but yeah, not enough for the 1980s. It was quite salacious. So I'm doing 3 segments. One is on Paradise Island in the Bahamas, and 2 relate to services to civil engineering, because it's quite an interesting little homily about why getting involved in any organisation that you're part of is really something it's worth doing. Right, so the Bahamas. They had been in Norfolk, Virginia. This is my grandparents, both of them, had been in Norfolk, Virginia, doing a sort of taz around North America, looking at examples of bridges and tunnels in the time of doing the feasibility study for the Channel Tunnel. And so they'd just been to Chesapeake and looked at the bridge there, and everybody had agreed that the channel conditions, our English channel conditions, are not the same as the channel conditions in Chesapeake. Yes, they have ships that bump into bridges, but God, the mayhem that any bridge across from England to France. Yeah, right. So we left Norfolk early in the morning of December the 11th for our final assignment in the Bahamas, which proved to have an element of fantasy. After long delays and changes of plane at Atlanta and Miami, we arrived at Nassau in the evening and installed ourselves in the nice old-fashioned Royal Victoria Hotel. We had come in response to the cry for help from the Swede Herr Lindrath, who had asked for someone to assist on a tunnel problem, but he had not yet returned from New York. So we spent a happy day exploring Nassau and finding out more about the island of New Providence. On good advice, We lunched and swam at the Colonial Hotel beach on Paradise Island. On our map, it was called Hog Island, but it had been promoted in several senses. The island was a long, narrow strip which ran parallel to the Nassau coast and so formed a narrow waterway with the harbour at one end. To get across this waterway, there had to be much haggling with the local boatmen who would then row visitors across. The next afternoon, we spent 3 hours in Lindrot's office, where the mystery of his cry for help was revealed. Lindrot had been the business manager for a Swedish millionaire who had bought most of Hog Island, and on this estate he had built a fine mansion with superb gardens, and then he had expired. Another slightly eccentric American millionaire had bought the estate, kept Lindrot on as manager, and turned it into a select and luxurious hotel for rich Americans. He rechristened the island Paradise Island and called the hotel the Ocean Club. His name was Huntington Hartford. The hotel was over half a mile from the landing stage. Now, no rich American can contemplate walking that far. They would hire a Hertz car at the airport and be infuriated to find that they would then have to dismount, board a ferry launch, and have to walk or take the hotel taxi to the hotel. Lindrot advised that a bridge had been strictly forbidden because of shipping, so please, would it be possible to drive a tunnel under the waterway so that rich Americans could be spared this intolerable hardship? This made a contrast to the heavyweight matters that we had just visited. On inquiry, I found that the water supply was entirely from wells bored in the very permeable coral limestone, fed by plenty of rainfall, which portends wet tunnelling conditions. After studying maps and other information, I devised a scheme for a small-sized immersed tunnel of concrete boxes made from local materials. In order to inspect the site next day, Lindrot conducted us to a beautifully equipped launch, which set out with much eclat and smart boat hook drill by the uniformed bowmen along the waterway to the hotel wharf. We were then driven by the hotel taxi along an avenue between densely planted vegetation with lakes full of flamingos and imported palm trees. These were intended to give a tropical atmosphere to a non-tropical island. An annex provided additional luxurious bedrooms on either side of an open-air winter garden that led into the mansion itself, which was furnished in beautiful taste. We were then taken down the half-mile of gardens, which gave a vista down to the water's edge. First, we saw a swimming pool surrounded by every comfort for shady sitting and drinking al fresco, served by cheerful waiters from an adjacent bar. Then came sunken gardens of the highest standards. In one, we found a beautiful little sculpture of a mother and child by Reed Dick, which we had seen in the Royal Academy some years before. The real surprise was to chance upon a Gothic medieval cloister surrounding a square centre with sculptures, which was built on a small mound and ended the vista. This had come from an old French abbey where Randolph Hearst had bought it, had it packed in crates, shipped to his famous hideout in California, and like much else, it had never been unpacked. Years later, Huntington Hartford had bought the cases and shipped them to Hog Island, where it was realised that the parts had never been numbered. So the question arose as to who could solve the jigsaw puzzle of piecing it together. Hartford was advised that there was only one person, Monsieur X, a French archaeological architect who had been born in the town from which the cloisters had been ravished. So the call went out, "Search the world, find Monsieur X, no money to be spared." The reply came back, "Monsieur X retired. He is living in Nassau." We met Monsieur X, who had taken the job, and found him most interesting. He showed us with pride how he was replacing broken and missing parts by making precise moulds and casting especially coloured concrete to match the stone. It's still there on Paradise Island, apparently. That's my grandfather's photograph. Next day, Lindrot took us on a cruise to see other parts of the estate. including a new golf course being watered from newly bored wells. It is lucky that the Bahamas are seldom stricken by drought. He then left us to make ourselves at home at the Ocean Club. We had the swimming bath all to ourselves as the hotel was empty, being prepared for the Christmas influx 2 weeks later. Later, he and his wife crossed over to entertain us to dinner there. We were to leave for home the next day, travelling via Bermuda, but when Lyndon found that our plane did not leave until 9 p.m., he insisted that we should again spend the day at the hotel, which we gladly accepted. On my return home, I sent my report to Widmer and Platzer for them to follow it up. They're the Channel Tunnel people. There are 3 sequels to this fantasy. First, a bridge was permitted after all, which settled that. Secondly, we read that the hotel had been burned down, which was a great pity. Finally, we went to a film and saw James Bond swimming up an inlet with a familiar little bridge across it, following which he was thrown into a swimming bath full of alligators, which had not been the case when we swam in it. Right, so now it's services to civil engineering, which first bit he put in under arbitration under international law because he was busy travelling. So from November the 27th to December the 6th, all parties reassembled in Lausanne for 7 well-conducted sittings. We stayed at the Hotel d'Angleterre, where Byron wrote The Prisoner of Chillon, facing the Lake of Geneva, and which was only a short walk from Chez Stuckey, who they were staying with. The main city is on the hills above the lake with a funicular railway to help pedestrians to reach the centre, which we were able to do in off moments and evenings. One evening, I was rung up in the hotel by my secretary to advise that a confidential letter had arrived saying that the Prime Minister had it in mind to recommend me for the rank of Knight Bachelor, and would I reply by return. This took Sophie and me by complete surprise and astonishment, as it was so utterly unexpected. One is instructed to make no mention to others until it is announced in the London Gazette and the press. This happened on January the 1st, so yeah, nearly a month later, 1968, when there was an announcement in the Times. My daughter and her husband were staying with us at the time, and I left the paper on my son-in-law's chair with the heading prominent. Down he came to breakfast, took one look at the paper and swept it onto the floor with the words, New Year's honours, they've given it to all the wrong people. Then he took up the business section, which contained a photo, and said, Good Lord! My son Robert and his wife were at that time living over our garages and were rung up by friends, while Edmund, my eldest son, my father, went to his office and wondered why people were congratulating him. As all the family were within reach, we were able to have a very cheerful dinner party. The announcement was for services to civil engineering, which pleased me. Knighthoods are rare for civil engineers and usually go to the heads of firms, but I had been working single-handed since 1956, so I was naturally very pleased. I see from my diary that I had to reply to 270 letters. I think David Beckham's probably had to reply to more than 270. All right, this is a bit more on services to civil engineering. I may run out of puff. The work of the civil engineer is only dimly comprehended by the general public, and the expression services to civil engineering, which is often used in honours lists, may be equally mystifying. These can cover a multitude of good deeds beyond design or construction work or administration, and are usually without financial regard, but involve the valuable contribution of the spending of time. A colleague gave his opinion that you only had to give the appearance of standing vertical for others to come and lean on you. A less dogmatic approach might be to say that if someone is rash enough to say something useful or sensible, he can be in danger of being cajoled into becoming involved. Such services have been spent almost entirely on behalf of my profession and the institution of civil engineers. From my childhood reading, I had formed the respectful idea of the importance of the institution as well as a determination to try to join it as civil engineer. This attachment to an ideal is an occasional human characteristic, whether the object is a party, a church, a football club, a trade union, or a freak religion, or if it's lichens or twitching. Those who become infected are those who work to keep such bodies in continued existence. I first ventured to enter the sacred and imposing portals of the ICE as a first-year college student after applying to be enrolled as a student of the institution. On this misty winter's day, the imposing central hall was empty. It's a stunning hall. Was empty when a small window was slid aside in a room near to the entrance. A face looked out and shut it again. Footsteps rang on the stone floor at the far end, and a man appeared, stared, and walked off again. My nerve failed, so I quickly retreated and went inside Westminster Abbey instead. It seemed much friendlier. 40 years later, I think probably when he was president of the ICE, I suggested that there should be an open reception area or counter in the central hall, and that it should be occupied by a one-legged civil engineer. I explained that this meant a thoroughly experienced member who had been prevented from active work. His function should be to give a proper welcome to members, young and old, to listen sympathetically to their questions and direct them to which of the many officers they should go to solve their problems. The result was 50% successful. The open reception area was provided but staffed by a commissionaire, and it's still like that now. This was at least an improvement and provided a form of welcome. In my younger days, I had heard members complain that the institution was not interested in them and did nothing for them. The idea of doing anything for the institution does not occur to many, although it is only those who do so who keep it alive for other members. When I offered our model of Piccadilly Circus Station to be shown at the 1927 Conversazioni, I was fortunate to make a friend among the permanent staff. This was the man who was stage managing the affair, named E. Graham Clark, who later became the secretary. A feeling of belonging was intensified as I had just become an associate member, a mice. Years later, this became mice, while the older and more important mice were inflated into fellows or vice, much to the confusion of more enlightened members of the outside world, and certainly to my father when he stopped being a mouse and became a vice. Mice, vice. As my work was in or around London, I was able to attend many meetings at which papers were read. In those days, this was actually the case. They were solemnly read by the author, or, if he wished, by E. Graham Clark. In those days, it would be he. This shortened the time for discussion, which in those days seemed pompous to us younger members. I'm not sure he'd be quite happy about the book reading. This improved later, although delivery was sometimes poor. By good fortune, 3 contracts on which I worked became subjects of papers within my first 10 years. The Camden Euston Tube, which is sort of crochet of underground tunnelling, Piccadilly Circus Station, and Ford's Powerhouse. It helps to have been connected with published works. Then my real involvement began. I have described earlier how Sir Henry Japp insisted upon my taking part in discussions where some of what I said, especially on the new processes, as well as practical work, led me to being invited onto committees. The first was on the one to advise the War Damage Council on earth movement caused by war damage. This soon led to helping to compose 4 of the then quite new codes of practice as a member of the main committee. Site investigations, foundations, earth retaining structures, and earthworks followed each other in quick succession. Another appointment was to a regional advisory committee on technological education. I forget whom we were to advise, but I was able to meet the heads of a number of bodies, such as Woolwich, and Northampton Polytechnics, and the Brixton School of Building, which made mutually useful contacts. The lesson from this was that no one takes the advice of an advisory committee, and their only value is to increase one's circle of acquaintances. So on that note, I'll complete on the reading part. It's how many pages? 400 pages. No, 266, including the index. And it's packed full of insights and wisdom and history and advice on networking on many levels. I've found it very instructive having worked on it. So thank you very much for joining me and for tonight's reading. If you are interested in finding out more about the book, there is a Kindle version available on Amazon. Otherwise, it is £19.95 plus postage and packing on www.tiliapublishinguk.co.uk. I think the link's in the description, and have a really good rest of your evening, and cheers.